All right. So, after reading chapters 5 and 6 of Under the Gun, I would say I think the most really important chapter to me was chapter 5, and I think it's because it highlighted the tragedy of gun violence and domestic violence relationships. And something that stuck out to me was three out of every 10 women experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. In the United States, the presence of a gun in these situations increases the risk of death by over 5 times. And I think that's something that's really important, especially when it comes to the gun violence in particular. And then another thing in chapter 5 was when it talked, right here it says, a gaunt young man with brown curls sweeping down his face wrapped a long white index finger around the trigger of a .22 caliber Savage Mark II rifle, aiming at the head of his mother while she slept. He squeezed the trigger, sending 4 blasts careening through her head, murdering Nancy Lanza as she lay asleep in her pajamas. Then the man drove his mother's car to Sandy Hook Elementary School, and his mind clouded in a murderous rage. He killed 20 young school children and 6 teachers on December 14, 2012, before turning a gun on himself in what, at the time, was one of the worst mass shootings in American history. So then it talks about how President Barack Obama reacted. He said, "We've endured too many of these tragedies in the past few years. And each time I learn the news, I react not as a president, but as anyone else would, as a parent. And that was especially true today. I know there's not a parent in America who doesn't feel the same overwhelming grief that I do." He paused for 11 seconds, holding his hand near his left eye as if to hold back tears. President Obama continued his speech, landing a phrase that struck those in the injury prevention community as especially poignant. "We're going to have to come together and take mindful action to prevent more tragedies like this, regardless of the politics." And I think that specific quote within his speech is so important, because even now we are still struggling with gun violence and mass shootings. Talk about Oxford, talk about Parkland, talk about the Michigan State shooting, the Iowa shooting, and all of these different school shootings that have happened in the last 10 years. Something else that I found interesting was, for many in America, the shooting at Sandy Hook was a turning point in the debate about gun violence. Shannon Watts, the mother of 5 children, began a conversation the following day through a Facebook page she called 1 Million Moms for Gun Control. In the aftermath of the killing of 20 children and 6 school teachers, Watts' passion and advocacy eventually evolved into the organization's Moms Demand Action, a nonprofit group that a decade later had over 6 million community advocates on its rolls. And I think that's something that should be more talked about, if I'm being 100% honest with you. And then in chapter 6, it says, "This is our lane." So the ACP, which is the American College of Physicians, a professional organization of internal medicine doctors, had recently written a position paper that members believed would have helped save Americans' lives from the ravages of gun violences. In the years since the NRA sneaked a Dickey amendment into the budget for the CDC and added a similar rider into that of the NIH, effectively terminating federal research on gun violence, medical organizations continue to use what data existed, as well as common sense solutions, to improve the lives of their communities and their patients. This chapter really stuck out to me because it was more of the medical aspect of gun violence versus just data being constantly thrown at you. Is something that also stuck out to me was right here. It says, moments before midnight, a patient came with stroke-like symptoms. I sat in the CT scan control room with my team, a collection of emergency department residents, emergency nurses, and a neurology resident who had rushed to the emergency department after receiving the stroke alert page. While our patient was loaded onto the firm slap-like gurney, while the CT scanner began to whirl and the gurney began to move through the donut of truth, I took a few quiet moments to click my phone back on to see what is going on in the world. To my disgust, America had been struck with yet another mass tragedy, this time in Thousand Oaks, California. The tragic irony was that it had happened fewer than 12 hours after the NRA's tweet. The irony was not lost on Dr. Kyle Fisher, an emergency physician at the University of Maryland. Fisher had sent me a message that said the combination of the NRA's tweet and the recent tragedy in California had lit a fire under him. He was tired of being told by special interests that he didn't have a right to speak up on a topic that he had expertise in, not only because of the emotional toll that losing a patient to gun violence takes on him, but because, like many others, he has been trained in and understood the policy and politics behind the issues. I think something that, this is just an important topic. Gun violence is such an important topic. And to end this conversation with a quote, last year, nearly 40,000 Americans died from firearm injuries. 10 of those thousands more were injured but survived. We can only vaguely state tens of thousands because, if we are honest, we really do not know the exact number from that statistic. Plagued by decades of intentional policy decisions and underfunding, America lacks an accurate reporting system for non-fatal gunshot wounds.